Okay. Before we commence, let's take a few moments to worship the Supreme One, the infinitely compassionate One, the Sublime One, the Blessed One, the Supreme Buddha. To do this, can you all be upstanding and recite the Namaskar with me? Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, you may you may now all be seated. Okay, before we commence, before we inaugurate, let's take a few moments to make before we inaugurate, let's take a few moments to make the determination. So, may the qualities of the great arahants enter my life and be part and parcel of them. May I be able to accumulate these qualities, and may these help me to attain the supreme bliss of Nirvana. Okay, having made the firm determination, let's begin. Okay, so today we're going to talk about the story of an arahant who was definitely one of the unluckiest people to ever be alive. Now, you could ask, why is that? Why is he unlucky? Well, you'll see as we go through the story how his whole life was terrible, a misery. And how even the Buddha can't help you all the time. Okay then, let's go back in time to the Buddha Gautama in the city of Shushamagira. So in the city lived a very rich man. And when I mean rich, I mean he was a billionaire. He was extremely successful. Whenever he invested in something, for example, a new business, he would get a large profit in return. And that business would help him get more and more money. So he was extremely satisfied with his businesses, but he always wanted more. Because he had a lot of money, he had a lot of businesses in properties, shops, merchants, but his main source was import and export from other countries and from foreign islands as well. So you can imagine he lived a life of luxury. He had 100 servants working under him, a beautiful wife that loved him very dearly, a colossal mansion with everything, with a lot of bedrooms, bathrooms, maybe even a pond, and so on and so forth. And he only wore the finest of clothes, rode the finest of carriages, led by premium stallions. And you can guess, he only ate the divinest of food, drank only the expensive wines. He had the money. So he was living almost a life, a heavenly life as a human. Now to him, his luck was with him all the time. Because one day, his wife bore him a beautiful daughter. She was stunning. She had golden colored skin with big eyes. You could say her father, so Buddha, that's his name, was the luckiest man alive to have her. And as she grew of age, she was gorgeous. She was the idol of beauty. She was extremely attractive. The sight of her was literally breathtaking. But it wasn't just her smile that made everyone stop and admire her. She was a person with a pure heart, a person who cares dearly for others, no matter who they are, no matter what caste. She had a pure heart. But anyway, she was the best thing that happened to Buddha's life. And so when she grew of age, and it was an age to be married, many men from all around the city, neighboring cities, the whole country would come to his house and request for her hand in marriage. He decided he wanted the best for his daughter. And so he put up some conditions for her future husband. So he said, "Dear future husband of the daughter of mine, to have her hand in marriage, you must match my caste, match my status, match my wealth, have all these assets, have a big house like mine. But no matter how much you have, you must be pure of heart as well. If all these conditions are fulfilled, I promise you, you have her hand." So these conditions were very tight, because many people would have turned back after hearing some of the first one or second one. Because you can imagine, he was a person of a high caste, a very good status, and he was a billionaire. He was one of the richest people in the whole country. The assets he had, the house he had, are unmatchable. But no matter what these people had, to have a pure heart is very rare. I feel that Buddha was looking more for the pure heart than the assets. Because the pure heart would make her daughter happy. The assets would just make her live more comfortably. And so many people would have turned away and said, "We can't match these conditions. If you have a change of mind, we'll come back. Don't worry." But one day, we all have heard of the banker Anathapindika. He was also very rich, right? He heard these requests and thought that this young lady would be perfect for his son. So he could match his caste. He can match his status, because they both were very respectable men. And he can match their wealth. Because, as you remember, the banker Anathapindika bought Jetavana, or the land for it, by placing gold coins to cover the land. Think about it. That's a lot of money. But anyway, he went to Buddha and requested for her daughter. And so Buddha took his list out and checked all of it. Caste, status, wealth, assets, health, pure of heart. Luckily, Anathapindika's son was very pure-hearted. And we know that he becomes a sothapanna in his life. Whether it was before this or after this, I don't know, but he becomes a sothapanna. So Buddha was most happy to give her hand to the son of Anathapindika. Now you can guess, right? When two billionaires come together to make a wedding, you can imagine the size. Thousands of guests, from rich barons, maybe to even royalty. They served the greatest food, and you could say they had the greatest time of their life. And at the end of the wedding, Buddha was happy. He was happy for his daughter. And as she leaves him to spend the rest of life with her husband, he decided to continue his life as well, with his businesses, for the next few months, like normal. So far, Buddha is having a great life in his eyes. Everything is almost perfect. And he thought something like that's going to stay there with him forever. Unfortunately, it didn't. Because one morning he woke up with a bad feeling. He felt like something was different with him. Something that wasn't right. And so when he got off the bed, immediately he stubbed his toe. And he thought that was the first sign of bad luck. And that was only the beginning. So he went down for breakfast, and a servant came up to him with urgent news. Sir, I have some news for you. One of your merchant ships have collided with some sharp rocks, and it ripped a hole in it. Sir, unfortunately, only minimum amount of items on the boat was saved. Most of the treasures were sunk with the ship, and it cannot be recovered. I'm extremely sorry, sir. I'm extremely sorry to disturb you with bad news first thing in the morning. And so Buddha dismissed this. You're dismissed. Thank you for the message. And as the servant left, never had Buddha had anything like this before. I had bad news first thing in the morning. But he knew that it's normal for a business to drop once in a while. So he thought it was normal. But then in the next few months, unfortunately, some of the businesses had to close. Some of his property raided. More and more of these ships have sunk, raided, he was losing more than he was profiting. And while all this was happening, his wife was bloating, becoming bigger and bigger. His beautiful wife was growing in size for no apparent reason. In few months, from a perfect life to a life of disaster, his whole world seemed to be crashing in. There had to be a reason. There had to be a reason why he was becoming unsuccessful. It couldn't be just because. And so he went to a soothsayer and asked him, "Soothsayer, please explain to me why my businesses are collapsing and why I have all this bad luck." The soothsayer thought for a moment and replied, "Sir, it seems like all your misfortune is because your wife is pregnant and she will have a baby boy. But Buddha's always heard that babies are something that brings joy and happiness to lives, brings fortune." The soothsayer replied, "Yes, but it looks like your child would only bring you misfortune and nothing more. I suggest you get rid of him while you still can, before he causes more problems." But Buddha thought about this. No. He will give me good. I will not kill him. He will live. I love him no matter what. I will not kill him. I don't care if my businesses collapse. I will not kill my son. Think about it. He's sacrificing his luxury for this son. Because this son is the thing that's bringing all this bad luck. Think about it. Like a major issue in the world today. Abortion. Buddha decided, no matter what happens to my life, I will not kill my child, my son. And so Buddha left without saying a word. He was overjoyed to hear that he's going to have a son. So he spread the news about having a baby boy to everyone. And explained why his wife's stomach was increasing in size day by day. And he thought he will live a happy life again. But unfortunately, his misfortunes, like the soothsayer said, weren't decreasing, they were increasing instead. It came a time where Buddha couldn't handle the stress because all of his businesses were not giving him enough profit. And this stress was unable to bear. He couldn't go to sleep as he was scared that when he wakes up, he's going to be bombarded with more problems and more bad things happening that need solving. He couldn't eat like he used to. Anyway, the quality of his food was decreasing due to the loss of money. There was a limit. His patience came to that limit. So he left enough money to maintain the house and for food for his wife, servants, and for all their bare necessities. And he decided he wanted to take a vacation, a holiday. So he went for the nearest forest to have a long, deserving vacation for a while until all this settles. So Buddha's life is utterly ruined. And he decides he wants to leave all this behind and go into the forest and live or have a holiday in the forest while everything settles. You can imagine him telling his wife and servants, don't come and disturb me unless it's good news. Because he's also human, right? He can't handle all of this bad misfortunes happening. And he did the right thing, right? So he left enough money for his wife and servants. He didn't completely abandon them. And so one day while Buddha was in the forest, and you can imagine him enjoying some fruit, a servant came running into the forest, shouting, I've got great news, great news. I come bearing great news for my master. Now hearing this, Buddha was surprised. Good news? Finally some good news. And so he says, please tell me, servant. I've been waiting a long time to hear such words. And so the servant exclaimed, saying, Sir, I come bearing great news. Your son has been born. Now this made Buddha extremely happy to hear that his son has been born. But just before he could say something about this, say that, wow, that's very good, that's great news. Before he could say that, another servant came running into the forest and said, Master, your house is on fire. At the moment of your child's birth, a fire appeared in the house. Luckily, no one's injured, but the fire has destroyed parts of it. At the birth of his child, a fire appeared in the house. It didn't kill anyone, luckily, but it destroyed the house, right? But Buddha thought about this and said, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if my house burns down. My child is born, and I'm going to give him a good name, a great name, in fact. I'm going to name him Good Comings, because he will bring good comings. So he named him Sagatha. But Sagatha brought a lot of fortune to the family. Their house burning down was only the beginning. Their house was ransacked. So thieves came in and stole from them. Merchant ships were burnt for no apparent reason. Even Buddha's most trusted ship sunk with the crew. His banks were raided. Scams, bribes, murders, the list of disasters were endless. One after the other, after the other, after the other, on and on and on and on. His life was disastrous. But through all that, Buddha, the father, would not let any of this harm the baby, Sagatha. For many months, years maybe. He wouldn't say to Sagatha, it's all your fault. It's because of you our house is burnt down. It's because of you these thieves came into our house 3 times this week and stole from us. It's because of you we can't eat our food. He has never said that. Buddha was a sponge. He let all the water soak up inside him and not let any of that water harm his child. Now that is a great parent. That is a great father. He didn't let anyone else stress about it. He took the stress for himself. That is a sacrifice though, isn't it? He sacrificed himself for others. He is now storing all of this suffering inside of him and not letting it harm others. He was a great father. But obviously there's a certain limit that a man can handle stress. This has all happened in a very short period of time. And also he was aging as well. So his age was against him, and all the stress wasn't good for his health. So Buddha's life unfortunately ended shortly after. And a few days later, his wife also went with him. But remember, all of this happened because of Sagatha, the son. So the death of his parents meant nothing. The misfortunes were still there. Now the worst happened. All the big businesses, the businesses that didn't need much maintenance because they were working perfectly, they were all bankrupt. And they had to be closed or handed over to another person. Their house, the house that Sagatha lived in, was rummaged, ransacked by thieves many times over. There wasn't as much as a penny or a single piece of money in the house. Soon all the ships were destroyed, sunk, burnt. All the property was destroyed or stolen. Now Sagatha was surrounded by all this. Remember, his father was a sponge, right? But Sagatha was very young. He can't handle all this. So he lived years in a world where everything was collapsing in front of his own eyes. Like property, money, status. You can imagine people didn't even visit the house anymore. Because one, the house was a terrible mess. Two, because they thought if they went inside the house, they'll become unlucky as well. And three, they just didn't want to. Sagatha wasn't a person who they like anymore, because he's the one who bought all this, right? Now, as you remember, in this house, this massive mansion, there were hundreds of servants, cooks, chauffeurs. But having seen all this happening, they thought if they live in this house for any longer, they would have bad luck as well, or they will die as well. And so they took all their belongings and anything else in the house that they can carry. Whether it's food, whether it's kitchenware, whether it's furniture, they'll take those and they ran away. So you can imagine Sagatha lived in a completely empty house. There was absolutely nothing, not even a grain of rice. The kitchen was ransacked, was rummaged through. The food has been robbed, kitchenware, movable furniture. It's almost like Sagatha was left inside the house to starve. Not even his neighbors would come to him, go to his house and give him some food, water, clothes, because they thought if they went near him, this unluckiness would rub against them and they'll become unlucky as well. He became a charm of unluckiness. And we're talking about a very small child, a young child. You can guess he doesn't know how to cook, even if he had food. So you imagine he would used to sit in a corner and just wait there. You can imagine for years he thought that this was just a nightmare, that he'll wake up to find himself in his mother's arms. And when he wakes up on the kitchen, there'll be a big meal laid by a beautiful maid. But every day when he wakes up from this dream, reality would smash him in the face. He would wake up not because he had enough sleep. He would wake up because the animal inside of his stomach is scratching the inside. Every single day, people who used to love him would leave. Servants Servants who used to be like friends and family to him would leave. Soon his heart became empty. He had no hope. You can imagine him lying in a corner, unable to understand anything that's happening. But luckily, one day, an old maid who used to work in the house came into the house again and asked Sagatha if she can work there again. Now Sagatha was confused. Why did you come back? Look, because I'm so unlucky you guys left. Why do you want to work here again? But this old maid said, Master Sagatha, this has been your home as well as mine for many years. Even before you were born, I used to work here. Your father was very kind and helped me when I needed help. Your mother was extremely nice and treated me like a mother. Never called me by harsh names. For this, I am thoroughly indebted to them. Therefore, can I please work here? Now, you can take two things from this. Number one, Sagatha's parents used to treat their servants like people. Servants or workers like people, like family, like friends. So this old maid thought it's her duty to take care of Sagatha. Now think about how great of people they must have been to make her feel like that. And also, let's look at the maid as well. This maid couldn't bear seeing Sagatha all by himself. She felt she was indebted to his parents. Now obviously she's a maid, she gets paid. But she felt that for all the work that they've done for her, all the kindness, all the smiles, all that help, she felt indebted to them. She must do something in return. So she decided to come back and help Sagatha. So Sagatha's life was empty. Now this old maid had come into his life and brightened his life. You can imagine him waking up the next morning feeling overjoyed that there's one person in his life, one person who came back to care for him. You can imagine even when his house looked like it was haunted almost, that no one was there to care for him, no one was there to help him any sort of way. Even though it was all like that, once this old maid came into his life, he felt happy. That it felt like a home again. A house turned into a home because of one person. He thought that he was dreaming. And so when he woke up and he went down to have breakfast, the maid said, Master, why are you late? You should have left the house by now. And so Sagatha was confused. Where am I supposed to go? Well, you're supposed to go to school, aren't you? Have you not been to school? Now Sagatha was overjoyed. He ran into his room with a great smile on his face. He finally had a person who cared about him. So he rummaged through his wardrobe and found some clothes that didn't have holes in it. And so this was his best clothes. And he went and asked for the directions for his new school and left the house without having breakfast. So school, you can imagine, was terrible. The unluckiest person goes to school and you can imagine how school was. But that's not where we're going to go. We're going to go to his house again, stay in his house. So in the house, the maid, obviously looking at this massive house and thinking where she should start, went into a room and started clearing it out. And after she cleaned the room out, she went to the kitchen and decided to make a meal for herself and Sagatha. Because Sagatha hadn't eaten breakfast, hadn't had breakfast. So she went to the kitchen and went to the storeroom and found that there's no rice, no vegetables to make curries. She found some coins in the room that she just dusted and used that money to buy a small bag of rice, raw rice. So she prepared the rice. And as she was cooking, as the rice was boiling, she left the kitchen to see if there's anything, like something to make a curry out of. And she came back empty-handed, obviously. And she looked back into this boiling pot and saw that this rice was burnt. There's a black slag at the bottom of the pot. And so she decided to restart She sort of washed the pan, the pot, and prepared the rice again, and then put it in the fire. And again, when she looked at it again, the black slag started to form. So she did one more time. But this time, before she put the pot in the fire, she said, "This rice is for me." Now, in a few minutes, when the rice is cooked, the rice became a pearl white color, and it smelled good for plain rice, and it was soft. So the old maid knew that Sagatha brought bad luck, that he was the charm of bad luck. She thought that this bad luck was too much to handle, that if she stayed in this house, she won't be able to eat either, because think about it. She said this rice was for her, so she almost cheating her master, and she thought that I can't cheat my master. That's wrong. She's not gonna be faithful. So she knew that she had to leave. So she consumed half of the portion of rice and left the other half on the table, took all her personal belongings and left the house. You see, she left because she didn't want to be unfaithful. Because she said this rice was for her, not for her master, Sagatha. And so it's almost like stealing. And she didn't want to steal. So instead of breaking his heart by telling him that she's going to leave, she took her belongings and left the house. And so when Sagatha came back home after a terrible day at school, he was expecting to see this old maid, and he was expecting to live a happy life. And so he found that the maid was in the kitchen, was in the rooms, and so he thought that the maid was playing with him. For the whole day he looked for this maid. In the kitchen he found this plate of warm rice, and so he was hungry. So he sat down and saw that the rice, this warm rice, was molding, had mold on it. Well, that's fine, because he can remove the mold and eat it. But he heard a noise in the front, in the lounge. And so he went in the lounge to see if the maid was there, but so instead saw a dog. And so he went back in the kitchen and found another dog eating his meal, having licked the plate clean. The house was completely empty, just like Sagatha's heart. His home was no longer a home, it was a house. It started to attract dogs. It became a dog den. Dogs will howl. Sagatha couldn't go to sleep. So Sagatha went back into his room and held his stomach and cried his heart out. Everyone he loved left him. His stomach was burning with the acid. His heart was burning like it was on fire. Both he and the house were a place for people just to come, take, and not give back. But it was that moment that he remembered. He has relatives. He has people who used to love him. Relatives, uncles, aunts. And they were extremely nice, and they also had food. So Sagatha thought that he could go there and ask his aunt and uncle for a meal and a place to stay, and until he can put his life back together. So when he went there, he went to the front gate and called out, "Uncle, aunt, are you home?" But there wasn't a reply. He called out again, and instead this time he jumped over the gate. I went to the front yard. Now knocked on the door. No one seems to answer. He opened the door. That's when he saw the uncle and aunt fight. They are having an argument. And they were shouting at each other, screaming at each other. And at that moment they saw Sagatha. And they shouted, "Get out! Why are you in our house? You're full of bad luck. Don't give our house bad luck." And you can imagine what sort of mood they were in. They were having an argument just a minute before. They were screaming their heads off. And so Sagatha said, "Please, all I want is some food. We don't have food for you. Get out." And so Sagatha, with his eyes full of tears, went out. So he decided he wanted to find some food, so he went to his other relative's house. Again, this other relatives didn't accept him, told him to go out. "You are bad luck. We don't want you. You are not our relative." And so his relatives have abandoned him, have not accepted him, had no food, no money. The only thing he had was himself and the rags, the old ripped clothes he was wearing. So he was homeless. He has nothing. So he went round town to town looking, begging for food. But no one gave him anything. He was the unluckiest person alive. And so he went round, and one day he found a group of beggars who worked together to find food. And it was a very large group, and so he decided he's going to join without saying much. So that day, the group of beggars went out to beg for food, and everyone came back with nothing. They didn't have any food. Second day, they went out again, and again they came back empty-handed. Third, fourth, fifth, until they realized that something's not right. Something was different. Because usually they would find at least some food. But for 5 days in a row, they couldn't. So they thought that it had to be someone in the group. Someone who's done some bad karma or has very unlucky. That is because of them that this group doesn't have any food. And so the head or the leader asked them, is anyone unlucky? And obviously no one answered. And so the leader separated the group into halves. So he separated the group into two and sent them both two different ways. And obviously the half without Sagatha got a lot of food. The group with Sagatha got nothing. And then the second day, the group that got nothing was separated into two groups. And again, so the group without Sagatha got the food, and the group with Sagatha didn't. And they went on and on and on and on until it was just Sagatha and one other beggar. And obviously, the other beggar got a lot of food and Sagatha didn't get any. And so Sagatha was kicked out, was thrown out of this group, and was told never to return.